Welcome to Behind the Scenes, the podcast where we delve into the diverse perspectives of the brilliant minds at Entura, one of the world's most experienced power and water consulting firms. This podcast comes to you today from Nipaluna, Hobart, the traditional country of the Moina people of the Southeast Nation. We acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people and their ongoing connection to culture and country, and the traditional owners of other lands people are joining from today. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. Join us as we explore the stories of talented individuals shaping a sustainable future, discover who they are, uncover the intricacies of their role, and explore what drives their passion. Get ready for an insider's view into the heartbeat of Entura and the journey toward a more sustainable tomorrow. Dr Cynthia Nixon is a senior sustainability consultant with Entura. She has a degree in environmental engineering and a PhD in environmental conflict, media and the law. She's been on the cutting edge of emerging industries her whole career, always with a focus on making the world a better place. She's energetic and passionate about driving equality in the power industry around the world. Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you.
First question I want to ask you today, who are you?
Wow, that's a big question, Mark.
It is.
Who am I? Well, I would say, firstly, I'm a mum. Second, I'm someone who really cares about how this planet is evolving. And thirdly, I'd say I'm a learner. I love to learn new things.
What's your role at Entura?
I'm a senior sustainability consultant. So I support projects, understand social and environmental risks and how to mitigate those. I also manage the integrity framework management system that Entura has to ensure that we work on the right projects with the right clients and understand our risks associated with sustainability issues.
I want to take a couple of big steps back. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in rural New South Wales. My parents have a sheep and wheat farm on the Riverina. Flat as a tack, very dry. Spent my childhood there. And so I grew up in quite an isolated community where basically what you did was school and sport. Then I went to university in Melbourne and studied environmental engineering there.
And what led you to study environmental engineering? Well,
in my last few years of high school, so year 11 and 12, it was like the late 90s, and there were a lot of sort of global environmental issues being discussed. Things like the hole in the ozone layer, global discussions around climate change were starting to happen. Forestry practices were being questioned, things like that. So it was quite topical. And in year 12, there was the Rio Summit, which is quite an iconic summit around environmental issues. So I think it just captured my attention. I'd always been interested in the environment, grown up in a rural area. So there was a lot of new university courses coming out about environmental issues. So I actually, the environmental engineering course I did, I was only in the third year of its existence, so it was quite new. There was quite a lot of women who were doing it. So I sort of embraced that course and went to Melbourne.
Okay, and there was always going to be a kind of academic path for you. There was no kind of taking over the farm in the future?
No.
How
I come from a very traditional family, though my dad, and maybe I shouldn't share this, but my dad did say I passed the sheep yards test, which is like, can I go into a sheep yard and the sheep actually do what they're supposed to do? So there was potential. My sisters supposedly didn't pass the sheep yard test. So, but no, it's a very isolated environment. and it's your life on a farm. It's your 100% your life, 150% your life. My parents are still there today in their late 70s working so hard. It's unbelievable, yeah.
So coming out of the country, out of the isolated little town into the big flashy city of Melbourne, how did you find that transition?
It was awesome. I loved it. Melbourne had this fantastic pub scene at the time. So, you know, you'd go to all the pubs in Carlton and Fitzroy and inner city Melbourne and all these amazing bands, and just the social life was great. The course that I did at uni, we only had 30 in our year, and so we all became really close friends. I'm still friends with them, with some of them now, today, so many years later. So it was just a really supportive environment, lots of friendships, lots of fun. But engineering, I used to, like our first year of engineering, we had like something like 38 contact hours a week. So it was like a full-time job, and I used to look over at the art students and go, oh, I wish I could just lie on the grass and read a book. So yeah, it was hard work, but Melbourne was heaps of fun.
And how were you as a student?
Oh, I was a girly sport. Yeah. I like to... I think I have high expectations of myself, so I do try, and I do, yeah, I put in the effort.
Fair enough. So finishing off that bachelor's degree,
yeah,
what was the next step?
Well, I just applied for jobs everywhere and ended up getting a graduate position at a paper mill in Tassie. So I just went, yeah, okay, I'll go there. I didn't really think about it that much. Had never been to Tasmania before, except for the job interview. So I ended up working at the paper mill at Boyer, just half an hour out of Hobart, and spent about 6 years there.
What was the role there?
It was a graduate environmental engineer.
Right.
So that site basically had so much. It's quite an old site. So for an environmental engineer, there was heaps of things to get your hands dirty. Effluent treatment, had its own landfill, had its own coal-fired boiler, own sewage treatment plant. There was just a lot of environmental issues that needed managing, and so it was a great learning experience.
Right, so that transition from country to Melbourne to Tassie, there's a step change there. Was there a bit of a culture shock coming down to Tassie? Was it almost like a bit of a return home? Did you like the downsizing, I guess, in volume of people, maybe?
I found Hobart really easy to live in. So Melbourne has a lot of the social scene, the cultural scene, and when I first came to Hobart, I was a little, where are the cool places to go? Where's the live music? That was a bit disappointing because it was, I'll admit, it was pre-Mona time. But it's been really great watching Hobart become a cultural place, and that mix of the local environment and art and music and festivals and all those things growing over the time that I've been here. And that's one, I suppose, that evolution of those different ideas and communities has been great. So I find Hobart a livable city. I go back to Melbourne and Sydney, and the thought of being on public transport for so long, I just I don't like that idea.
Yeah.
So I find the accessibility of like the ocean, the beach, the bush, all that sort of stuff. So when I did come here, I replaced and there was, where's all the good live music? I replaced that with bushwalking and camping and doing all the things that Tasmanians do.
Yeah. So in those early days, being an environmental engineer in an industry that is a fairly old industry, being the paper industry, and in a fairly old plant, being Boyer, did you find that there were a lot of barriers or maybe resistance to the things that you were trying to achieve?
Well, it always is rather confronting in those environments when you're a young woman with different ideas. And so there were barriers, but I had supportive colleagues, and we'd just work through issues. There was definitely times in meetings where I'd be the only female, and and there'd be that blokey bloke culture. I was there at a time when, the calendars of sexy women were still up in maintenance workshops and places like that, and you'd walk along and you'd hear that, Cynthia's coming. So, yeah, you just try and work through ways of connecting with other people as people, not necessarily as that genderised roles. The Boyer Mill also knew they had to improve their act, that they knew it was an old mill, and that the paper industry is highly competitive, and that owners do care about environmental performance. And it was always a challenge, always will be a challenge for that site being so old. But because of that circumstance, that mill has had so much innovation happening in it and people thinking outside the square in order to ensure that it continues. So that was a really nice environment to be in. There were some tough times. It's obviously a ship site, lots of guys around in hard yakka. So, you made friends with influential people.
Good strategy.
Yeah.
So from that grad position, where to next?
Well, I eventually got permanent environmental role at the mill, but I eventually found that I wanted just to explore new things. There was some, I suppose, issues where I felt that the mill could be doing more, but it just, everything was going to cost lots. So I ended up having a chat to the environmental manager at Hydro, and he ended up offering me a job. So I ended up at Hydro Tasmania in an environmental role for quite a number of years.
Okay, so that would have been a significant change again from a manufacturing facility to an asset-owning, renewable energy, kind of a very different focus between those two companies, yeah?
Yeah, very different, but I suppose the same application of systems and principles and things like that. So I found moving into Hydro, there was a lot more younger people. My job was more office-based. But then the site visits were always to amazing places, which felt like in the middle of nowhere. And compared to the industrial paper mill site, everything just felt so clean.
Yeah, and a lot of the times you get to do the bushwalking to get to the sites.
Yes, exactly. And then there's also, the paper mill was ingrained in Derwent Valley culture and community, whilst Hydro is ingrained in the whole of Tasmania. And everyone has a particular story and connection with it. So it's I felt like I was a part of something larger.
Okay. So at what point did you go back to education?
I've gone back to education quite a number of times. I did my Masters in Environmental Law whilst I was still out at Boyer, whilst I was working, so part-time study, full-time job. That was great. I really enjoyed that. And then once after I had children, my second child, I extended my maternity leave and went and did a grad dip in journalism, media and communications, and then that led to a PhD. So I sort of have done a few things in education. Okay, so
let's unpack that a bit, because that doesn't necessarily seem like it's a natural progression from environmental engineering to journalism.
Probably not.
So how did that come about?
Well, as a young girl, I always wanted to be a writer. I was because we're in the middle of nowhere, I used to subscribe to this writing school thing. I don't know what my mum thought, but these things used to come in the mail, and I used to try to, pretend to be a writer. I wanted to be an author. And that progressed later into, I think I want to do journalism. My father subscribed to almost every single newspaper you could possibly get. So my childhood was surrounded by newspapers and watching TV news. But then, I sort of ditched that and decided I'd go be an environmental warrior instead. But one thing I've found through with environmental issues is how communicating about them is so important, and they become so politicised. And so that whole mix of politics and media and communications and environment really interested me. So I felt that when I had this break in my career, an opportunity to study, I was like, well, why don't I just, dip my toe in understanding a bit more about communications and how these social and cultural aspects actually impact the way we think and feel and about environmental issues and whether or not we're prepared to take action and whether we follow through. So I started with the grad dip, and I was about halfway through that when an opportunity came up for a PhD scholarship in an area I was really interested in, which was around media representation of transnational environmental conflicts. So basically, how does media portray environmental issues that cross borders? And so I jumped on. I thought it's sitting at, this is a great opportunity. How about I just permanently ditch work and go do a PhD? So I did that.
And how long did that take?
That took 4 years.
With 2 young children?
Yes.
How was that balance?
That was balanced with a bit of daycare, weekend work, and I learnt not to procrastinate. You've just got to do stuff because you never know if tomorrow a child's going to be sick, something totally changes your plans. And so I became the master of procrastination, which I think is you just have to take opportunities when you get them. Yeah.
Okay. So upon receipt of your PhD, you then transitioned back into work. What was the role that you transitioned back into?
Well, it's basically the role I do now.
Okay.
At the time, I knew the principal consultant for social and environmental issues at Entura, and so I just casually said to her, do you think there's any opportunities? And she said, hey, Cyn, there it definitely is. I don't want to do some of this stuff anymore. So I just asked her at the right time. And my skills around research and understanding activism and media and reputational type issues was really relevant to the things that she needed to be done. So I sort of just took that on board and things have grown from there.
Okay, so when you say they've grown from there, how are you applying that to what you're doing today and I assume the international and national jobs that Entura are part of?
Yes, so now I support project teams about understanding mostly the social risks. Our team also has dedicated environmental scientists and consultants who look at the environmental issues. But through my understanding of more social science research, through my PhD and the communication and reputation aspects, as well as other social issues which have become much more apparent to businesses in the last 5 or so years, things like human rights and modern slavery. I contribute to projects in understanding what are those aspects that need to be looked at and mitigation plans. A common project I'd be involved in is a due diligence on a project to determine social risks and mitigations, for instance, what's local community sentiment around projects and how companies are engaging with communities and stakeholders. Have they said what they're going to do when they've built these projects?
Yeah, so this concept of social licence is a relatively new thing that people are really engaging with, from whether it be as a developer or even consultants working on projects. Does this align with what our vision is, what our mission is? How do you guide Entura and make sure that we maintain social licence, I guess, and stay on the right side of things?
Well, from an Entura perspective, they've set up a framework called the Integrity Framework, and so my role is to ensure that Entura operates within that. So that has commitments around environment, social and governance aspects, which we apply when we look at, do we work with a particular client? Do we work on a particular project? So my role is to understand what those potential risks are. Sometimes it can be too early in a project to fully understand it. But obviously potential clients will have quite a history of work, whether globally or nationally or locally. So we look at what work they've done in the past, what policies they've committed to, their level of performance, and we work through any issues internally and often ask questions of our client and or potential client and work through whether or not they adhere to Entura's values.
Your children are obviously a bit older now.
Yeah.
How do you find that work-life balance with them going to high school, I think?
Oh, one's in high school, one's in primary school.
Yeah. So how do you find that now?
Oh, look, they know when I'm on my computer I'm working. But look, I'm a casual at Entura, and that is one way that I manage it, in that I feel in control of my hours and in control of how much I can give. And that can change on a week-by-week basis with family commitments. So I find the understanding of Entura management about where I am at with my life, and I can commit a certain amount but not full-time, is a massive help. And the flexibility around that. So consultancy work, you can do at particular times. You can work from home a lot. I have a few clients that internationally, so it's not like they can be in the office having face-to-face meetings. So I work a lot from home, and that helps juggle. You can pick the kids up from school, you can organise your meetings around certain times, and that just takes away the stress. So it's the flexibility of where you work and when you work.
So a big part of Entura's reason for being is around sustainability and around renewable energy. What does that mean for you?
Well, it means that I'm working on projects that are supporting a better way for the future. So I also acknowledge, though, that not every renewable energy project is perfect, and with the pace of the energy transition, that there's potential for projects to get rushed, for developers to not do all the right things, for communities and stakeholders to be overwhelmed by what's going on and the changes that are happening within their communities. And we're seeing that already in parts of Australia, where acceptance of projects is not a given, even if it is a renewable energy project that's going to positively contribute. So I feel that it's important that we apply the same sort of sustainability principles that you do to other projects, to renewable energy projects. And I suppose there's also Entura's involved in development aid projects, such as with the Asian Development Bank and other funding agencies. And there's particular projects I'm involved in the Pacific, which you can see how positive those projects are going to be. So I think it's seeing that bigger picture of renewable energy transition globally and how it has local impacts and opportunities, and being able to be involved in those and yeah.
So you've got some involvement in some really significant projects, not only significant from the point of view of size and scale, but also really significant to that local community. Again, we talk about the jobs in the Pacific. Some of those places I know are running on diesel generators, and they're transitioning to renewable power. It must be immensely satisfying to be kind of at the cutting edge of that, at the front edge of that global energy transition.
Yes, and I suppose one of the big opportunities with some of those projects, which I've been personally involved in, is encouraging gender equality through renewable energy projects. So this is another space that I'm learning in, and it's when you work with some of these development aid projects, there's obviously the energy infrastructure, but then there's also other objectives of the project from a social development perspective. So what I've been really encouraged to be involved is the gender equality aspects, where they're trying to encourage with these infrastructure projects to get women involved in, say, employment, in participation, and being able to give women opportunities that potentially don't exist now.
And is that a big challenge in some places from a cultural point of view?
It's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. It's a challenge in Australia. As you can see with the latest pay gap reports that coming out nationally, and the different strategies companies within Australia are looking at, and it's known the energy industry worldwide is heavily male dominated. And I suppose I've experienced the fact that heavy industry is you often, I've been the only woman in the room. So I can relate, but then the women in Pacific Island communities, it's a totally different cultural context. So, and they face many other challenges that Australian women face. So it's been really a rewarding experience working with local women around understanding what those issues are and being able to share information and give some structure to the way that they want to implement some of these gender plans.
So across the board, with the projects that you've been involved with, again, in Tasmania, nationally, and then internationally, is there any that stand out as big highlights?
As big highlights? I would probably say the work that I did in the Solomon Islands last year was a highlight. And I would say that because that's where I learned a lot around the gender equality aspects. And I was able to work with local safeguard officers who were these fantastic women who work on a lot of the development projects. So I learned a lot doing that project. Got to visit the Solomon Islands, even though just Honiara, but it gave me a taste of what the Solomon Islands is about, particularly as we tend to get a certain image of Solomon Islands from the media here. There's the politicisation of Australia's relationship with the Solomon Islands. So I found that project quite interesting in the global context of where this really small country fits, and the role that this small renewable energy project could play in all of that.
What does the next 5 years look like for you?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not someone who has a grand plan. I tend to seize opportunities as they arise, and it was never a grand plan to do a PhD. There was never a grand plan to go to Tasmania. So I think, though, that I don't think there'll be another PhD, though, Mark.
But you can't rule it out.
I think I will. You only really need one.
Fair enough. So project-wise, do you see yourself going more down this this kind of equality route? Like, I feel like that's a fairly big passion for you. Maybe transitioning, doing less of that kind of environmental work, more into that social side of things? Yeah,
definitely that is a sway. I don't do a lot of environmental work now, but it is really important that I understand those contexts when I'm doing the social work. So yeah, there's a lot to learn in the social space. It's becoming an area which a lot of businesses and organisations and governments realise that we're not getting right. Stakeholders and community, for instance, in the context of renewable energy, have told us that they're getting fatigued around consultation. So what does that mean when it comes to communication and the way we do it and how we do it effectively? Mm. And then how do you engage some of these vulnerable groups and parts of communities who don't get the opportunities? So that is a passion. How that pans out, I'm not 100% sure. But I think it's a case of more and more these projects are requiring this sort of aspect, so just putting my hand up.
Yeah, and I guess there's a bit of work to be done, isn't there? The projects require this stakeholder engagement stuff to be done, but there's a big chasm between ticking a box and getting it done and meaningfully and genuinely engaging and trying to get the positive outcomes.
Yes, and it's a huge challenge, and there's no one way to do it because not every community is the same, and they all have different issues. I suppose developers need to go and communicate and consult in good faith and have meaningful dialogue, and that obviously means different things to different communities and developers. So it's a work in progress, I think. But it's the one thing that will challenge the energy transition. There's already a sense with transmission lines, like regional Australia, feeling like they're taking the burden of the amount of work that needs to be done in order to have renewable energy. And so I think governments, companies, developers all need to work on this aspect.
So I just want to touch back again on your original career in environmental engineering. What is environmental engineering?
You're not the first person to ask me that. Environmental engineering basically steals from all the other engineering professions and takes the relevant bits around environmental issues. Now, the course I did, you could actually minor in different types of engineering. So the actual title I have is quite long, Environmental Engineering Minoring in Chemical Engineering.
That's the actual title?
That's the actual title.
You got that on your business card?
Yeah. No. Which means way back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I could design pumps and pipes and pressures and, all that sort of stuff, which is sort of heads you down into pollution control and those sorts of areas, which is where I ended up at a paper mill. Other environmental engineers will take different slants. You could also do, in the course I did, you could also do geological engineering as a minor. You could do civil engineering as a minor. So you learnt those skills and then placed them in the environmental context. But one of the funniest things I found about the environmental engineering course I actually did, we actually had a course subject called oral and written communication because they were so worried that engineers couldn't talk or write. And we were like a bunch of women mostly, like there was 30 of us with 60% women. We could all talk and write.
So they might have missed the mark with the syllabus there a little bit.
Well, they'd been getting industry feedback.
Right,
so
I see. Oh, okay.
Like all engineering courses need oral and written communication. So we just all thought that was a bit of a hoot. But so yeah, it's a bit of a mash, and different universities will offer different mix-ups. But what you do learn is, I suppose, the global context around environment, and you can pick up on science things like ecology and toxicology and apply those to pollution control and groundwater remediation and all that sort of stuff.
So coming from being the third group going through that course, how have you seen that course evolve and change over the last however long?
Well, I haven't really been observing it, but I did go back to our 20-year reunion where the original course coordinator was pretty chuffed about how things had progressed. Originally, he thought that potentially the course wouldn't last, that there would be no industry need or desire for it. And he talked about how proud he was when his students were getting jobs. So, yeah, back in the early 90s, they weren't quite sure whether or not environment was an occupation in the engineering field, but I suppose it's shown that there is space for it, there's a need for it, and having that environmental context is quite important because I suppose engineering focuses on solving problems. So that course is teaching you how to solve environmental problems compared to science, who research and explores problems but doesn't always find solutions. So you do need science and engineers to work together.
So throughout your career, it seems like you've been at the front of new, emerging industries pretty much the whole way through. Is that something that you've done consciously? Is it something that you kind of look back and go, yeah, I have really been groundbreaking the whole time? Or is it not something you thought about until I just said it?
I haven't thought about it at all.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I just do it.
Yeah. You just like being on that front edge?
Well, I've never considered it at the front edge. It's the right thing to do. And I just follow, like as I probably said when you asked me who I was, I like to learn new things. I don't think I get bored easy, but I just like to learn new things. And so I suppose I'm attracted to where that groundbreaking area is because I want to learn about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the next thing is, what the next groundbreaking area is, and on the record, we cannot rule out another PhD. So thank you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for joining us on this insightful journey behind the scenes at Entura. We hope you've gained valuable insights into the incredible individuals driving sustainable innovation. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate and leave a review. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations as we continue to explore the people and stories shaping our sustainable future. Connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook and find out more about the work we do at entura.com.au. Until next time, this is Mark signing off from Entura's Behind the Scenes, where sustainability meets inspiration.